This wasn't supposed to turn into a full-blown war. But one simple comment about a boring fight just exposed something way bigger than boxing. It started off like any other sports take. Two guys sitting on a podcast reacting to what they just watched. No different from millions of fans online. But this time, the reaction didn't stay as just an opinion. It triggered something deeper: ego, power, respect, and suddenly everybody was talking. Mase and Cam looked at the fight and said what a lot of people were already thinking. It was boring, not terrible, not a disaster, just not exciting. And that's the key. They weren't even trying to disrespect. They were calling it like commentators do. But the moment those clips went viral, everything changed. Because once the internet amplifies something, it stops being just an opinion. It becomes a narrative. And that narrative hit a nerve. But the real escalation didn't even come from them. It came when a completely different voice stepped in and shifted the tone entirely. Jay Prince didn't just defend Shakur. He came in with authority, talking about numbers, ratings, proof. Basically saying, the data speaks for itself. And on the surface, that sounds reasonable. If the numbers are high, how can anyone call it boring? But then the tone changed, because it wasn't just about stats anymore, it turned into something else. I handle his business. I'll take all bets. That's not just defending a fighter. That's positioning yourself as the one in control, the gatekeeper, the one who decides what's valid and what isn't. And that's where things started to break. Because the moment you try to control the narrative, you invite resistance. And Mase didn't just push back, he flipped the entire table. He didn't argue about boxing, he didn't argue about stats, he went straight for something deeper. Respect, or more accurately, the lack of it. Calling out the whole big homie idea. Saying straight up, we don't respect that. And that's not just a personal shot, that's a generational statement. Because for a long time, that structure meant something. Older figures had authority. Their word carried weight. But now, that structure doesn't hold the same power. And Mase made it clear. Age doesn't equal respect. Titles don't equal influence. If anything, trying to force that respect just makes it worse. And just when it seemed like this was about to settle into a back and forth, it escalated again, because now the fighter himself stepped in. And that changed everything. Shakur didn't just respond, he made it personal, telling them to strap up, to step in the ring, to basically prove themselves physically. And that's where the lines got blurred. Because now it wasn't about performance anymore. It wasn't about whether the fight was entertaining. It became about ego. And that's a dangerous shift. Because once you move from criticism to confrontation, you lose control of the narrative. Mase and Cam didn't take that lightly. They flipped it immediately, saying, "This is boxing, not the streets." Drawing a clear line between entertainment and real-life consequences. Because what started as commentary was now turning into something much bigger than it needed to be. But then they did something even more brutal. They broke him down. Not as a person, but as a performer. Calling him boring. Saying he doesn't let his hands go. Saying he's too focused on not getting hit instead of actually entertaining. And that's the part that stings the most. Because in boxing, winning isn't always enough. You have to sell the fight. You have to make people care. And according to them, that wasn't happening. They pointed out the walkout, the lack of energy, the promises before the fight that didn't match what people saw in the ring. And suddenly the conversation shifted again. Now it wasn't just criticism, it was exposure. Because the worst thing for any fighter isn't losing, it's people losing interest. And just when you thought it couldn't get more uncomfortable, they went even further. They brought money into it. And this is where the power dynamic flipped completely. Because for decades, fighters were the stars, the center of attention, the ones everyone watched. But now, media has its own power. Podcasts, platforms, audiences. And Mase and Cam made that very clear. We make more money than you. That's not just a flex. That's a statement about the new economy of attention. Because today, it's not just about what you do, it's about who's talking about you and how much attention they can generate. And in this case, the conversation itself became bigger than the fight. Think about that. A week and a half later, people are still talking. Not about what happened in the ring, but about everything that happened after. That's the real shift, and that's where the deeper lesson sits. Because this was never just about one fight. It was never just about whether someone was entertaining or not. It was about control. About who gets to shape the narrative. About whether old systems of respect still apply in a world where anyone with a platform can say whatever they want and reach millions. The old rules said you earn respect through hierarchy. The new reality says you earn relevance through attention. And those two things don't always align. Mase made it clear, you don't get to tell people what they can and cannot say. Not anymore. Not in a world where opinions spread instantly, where clips go viral before you even have time to respond. And that's the part nobody wants to admit, because it means the power has shifted. It means you can't control how people perceive you anymore. You can only perform and hope the audience decides you're worth watching. And if they don't, no amount of titles, numbers, or legacy can fix that. Because in today's world, you don't lose when you lose. You lose when people stop caring.